Now, but why are they? I mean, if leptin is so helpful for controlling obesity, why have they become obese? Why wasn't leptin working? And how can we reconcile the fact that they have so much leptin? Again, to put a fine point on it, an overweight or obese person will have much more leptin than their lean counterparts will. It's because they become leptin resistant. So leptin resistance is when the body is no longer responding effectively to leptin. And importantly, that's the main part of the definition of leptin resistance. And those of you who've listened to me enough already know where I'm going with the next part. There's another component to leptin resistance, which is high levels of leptin, chronically elevated levels of leptin. Does that sound familiar? Because that's the same way I describe insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is this phenomenon where insulin isn't working as well as it used to, and equally essential, blood insulin levels are elevated. That is the same definition that can be applied to leptin resistance. One, that leptin isn't working particularly well, and two, leptin levels are elevated. Again, this is why injecting more leptin into the average overweight or obese individual does nothing. You're just wasting the leptin. It's not going to work. Now, what are the causes? Now, one final point before I get into the causes of leptin resistance. Earlier, I had mentioned that insulin has this strange relationship with leptin, whereas leptin inhibits insulin. Insulin stimulates leptin. So you've heard me before discuss the fact that it is completely impossible for an animal, human included, to get obese unless insulin is elevated. But so far, I've just been describing a scenario where the absence of leptin results in ridiculous and rapid onset and development of obesity. And now you're wondering, okay, so is the absence of leptin sufficient to cause obesity? Is that all we need? Maybe it's not insulin. Maybe Professor Bikman has been leading us astray. I have not been leading you astray, and I'm very glad to teach you the fact that it is still the insulin that is responsible for the direct growth of the fat cell. Insulin is a completely essential signal to the fat cell, telling the fat cell what to do with the energy that is available to it. Leptin does not do that. And importantly, a lot of people want to assign the absence of that leptin. If leptin is gone, the reason the animals become so obese, or a human with a leptin mutation becomes so obese, is simply because they eat a lot, and they do eat a lot. And so they would say, well, it's just purely calories. Remember, leptin inhibits insulin. And so if you don't have leptin, guess what has happened to insulin levels? In these animals that are leptin mutants, or even in humans, this is documented in both models, animals and humans. If you take away leptin, there is less of a signal to keep insulin dampened. Thus, insulin levels climb by multiples. So insulin has gone up significantly. In fact, Dr. Friedman himself, Gary Taubes, has quoted this in his book, Good Calories, Bad Calories. Dr. Friedman said that insulin goes through the roof. So it goes up by multiples. So even though leptin is influencing myriad processes related to metabolic function, it is still, at the level of the fat cell, the elevated insulin that is directly causing the obesity. Now, this starts to touch on the caloric versus endocrine theory of obesity. And in fact, leptin is a wonderful example, proof positive that the caloric theory is flawed. Calories matter, the energy matters, but equally, if not more important, is hormones that tell the body what to do with that energy. In fact, I would say more important than the number of calories. So in animal studies that take leptin mutant animals and compare them with their normal leptin litter mates. So these are the same general strain of animal, so same type of mouse, to be more accurate in my language, housed in the identical conditions and given the exact same type and amount of food. And that last point is very important. That's what's called pair feeding. So you take normal animals and pair feed them with leptin mutant animals. They're given the exact same number of calories. And guess what happens? The leptin mutant animals become fantastically obese. even though they're eating the exact same number of calories. Now, again, insulin has gone up by multiples, so it is still the insulin that really matters at the level of the fat cell. But leptin, of course, is the one who's driving the tempo here and changing things. But it is still a necessary change through insulin. But even still, keep in mind, please, when people are saying, no, obesity is just purely a matter of calories in, calories out, this is evidence that directly proves that wrong.